I had mentioned a little earlier in the podcast that I had a very dear friend who is an Israeli-American editor, actually, married to the top Israeli military man. And right after October 7th, 2023, a couple of weeks after it, when I got off the initial shocks, I sat down with her and I said, let's come up with what do we think are the hard realities for Israel and the world and the Jewish people? What are the hard realities? So this was done really just, 2 years ago. And these were the hard realities that we saw. So you want to, and they're on the web, incidentally, also.
On your website?
Yes, if you go to artofglobalpolitics.com, you go, in this case, to the blog thing. But here's what's up there. And then we're going to update it 2 years later.
2 years later. So this was right after.
Yes.
Pretty much right after.
Well over 2 years.
1. Iran currently has the power to endanger Israel, even without nuclear power, through the actions of their proxies in Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. The most serious threat is posed by Hezbollah, based in Lebanon and funded and armed by Iran. They are estimated to have close to 150,000 rockets and missiles, about 1/4 of which could reach all parts of Israel.
Okay, this is short, distinct answer. They had some of the most hard fighters in the Arab world. They were propping up the horrible regime of Assad in Syria, and they were ready to go over the border, which they did, as I had mentioned to you yesterday. After the initial October 7th, they started coming over the northern border of Israel. Almost 60,000 Israeli families had to literally go into hiding for over a year, find a place to live, and go on with daily life. They were a real threat. And the guy who ran it was a man named Nasrullah. I can never say his name, Nasrullah. But I have a lot of images of him. Unfortunately, they were not one that you necessarily picked, but they will be probably edited into this, or they're definitely on the website. This guy was, like Soleimani, was also charismatic. He didn't necessarily have the genius of Soleimani, but he was seen as a semi-divine leader. He was seen as a genius. And the Israelis, at the initial part of the war, dropped a bomb. He was in a bunker that was feet and feet of reinforced concrete. Should have been the safest place in the Middle East. The Israelis dropped a precision bomb that went through all these feet of concrete and killed him and all of his other henchmen. And if you remember also, this was absolute genius. Do you remember the pagers that they were given?
I remember.
All the young terrorists were given these sexy pages, to keep in time. The Israelis somehow had put munitions, ordnance, explosives in there, and they blew up the things. So these young men had their hips and probably part of their genitals and groins blown. That was a very strong message to them. So the good news is that the good news is most of the 150,000 rockets were disabled or destroyed. They still have a certain amount. A lot of them have precision guidance system, unlike the initial ones. But this big danger is that the U.S. and Israel did not take out all of Iran's missiles. I believe they're called hypersonic missiles. It goes just faster than the speed of sound. I mean, they're like Superman rockets type things. And the Israelis knocked out 95% of them from Iran. 5% got through and caused considerable damage. I'm not going to give the number, but the number was massive, and that's just with 5%. So for the time being, the missile threat from Lebanon has stopped for the moment, and that the Iranian government is afraid to try anything at this point with the Israelis. So you have something of a freeze frame right now.
Freeze frame.
Yeah,
Interesting.
things are, the Shiites and the Sunnis are degraded, but not out of the picture. So hopefully that answered that.
Well,
So that's a good thing. So the
So-
hard
so-
reality is it's a better reality
It's a better reality now than
than
it was.
Yeah,
All right. Number 2.
yeah.
The U.S. and other global powers could manage to live with an Iran armed with nuclear weapons. All the Iranians need to do is facilitate their survival, is to keep their oil flowing at reasonable prices, not interfere with global shipping, and refrain from openly antagonizing the U.S. and Saudi Arabia.
Okay, let's start from the very beginning. What's the first part of the question?
The first part, well, it's not a question, it's
Quick
just saying
statement.
that
Statement.
the U.S. and other global powers could live with Iran even with nuclear weapons.
Yes, they can. Absolutely. When they did the amazing B-2 bombing, the B-2 stealth bomber left from the heart of this country, from Missouri, went there, dropped these unbelievable bombs. It degraded the nuclear program,
Iran's.
Iran's program. It did not destroy it. The scientists are still there, and there's probably still hidden centrifuges and other infrastructure. When they did the bombing, that was actually not for the mullahs. It was to show Putin in the Ukraine. It was to show Xi in China that the U.S. is not a paper tiger at all, that it was seen. It can do things. It was technically a work of a military genius to go thousands of miles and do this with a stealth bomber that nobody could really see. It also sent, a message to the mullahs, and it also degraded somewhat the capacity. But Iran still has the capacity to get the bomb, if you're looking at the long game. What was the next point?
The next part is that you say that all that Iranians need to do to facilitate their survival is to keep the oil flowing.
That's entirely true. And they're very peculiar. Yeah, what it is.
So do we have a part in this?
Well, but it's mostly China. 90% of Iran's oil gets sold to China, and the Iranians buy Chinese armaments and military expertise. Israel is afraid of touching. I believe it's called Karg Island. Iran has all of its refining capacity, or most of its capacity, and shipping facilities on this island. Israel could take it out almost instantly, but China would wipe Israel off the map if that would happen. And also, no U.S. president, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, would allow for the economic mayhem of what would happen. Gasoline prices would go through the roof. I'm 75. I remember being, I guess I was 3 years old when you had the oil embargo, and people were going nuts here when gasoline
lines at the gas stations,
yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah, so that the Iranians are in a sense getting away with murder, getting a free pass on this, because they're still generating massive amounts of capital and money that's going into rebuilding Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. And also money going into the West Bank for problems, and all over the world cells, particularly in South America. And then also, to go into the next one about shipping. The Western world has become so soft. The Houthis in Yemen, really crazy, radical, primitive people, but they have enough things. They were sending missiles into Ben Gurion Airport, which is like the Heart's Field of, Israel. And the Israelis were having trouble stopping. So the Israelis would come in there and bomb the crap out of Yemen, out of the things. But they still, because of the portability of the missiles, they still have the capacity. So the free world is so soft and indifferent that Yemen, is a proxy of Iran, has made it very difficult and expensive for a lot of supply chains of the tankers to go through still. And the world really hasn't done anything.
In the Red Sea, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which made headlines for a while.
And then disappears. It disappeared.
Like many
we also
things,
had
the headlines.
American naval vessels there, but didn't, hasn't really degraded their capacity to cause problems with the shipping. So the Iranians had a victory.
And continue.
Continue to have a victory in it. Yep.
3. The manipulation of global public opinion is often financed by Qatar and other Arab nations, with Qatar-based Al Jazeera being an especially efficient tool toward that end. Its worldwide broadcasts are dominated by blatantly anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist programming, which continues to make daily life increasingly difficult and unsafe for Jews everywhere to openly express their opinions. Given the current international political climate, this could result in increasing challenges for diaspora Jews to advance to positions of influence and power.
Absolutely. That hasn't changed at all. It's actually even more so. A couple of weeks ago or a month or two ago, whatever it was, if you remember, the Israelis had an unsuccessful attack in Qatar.
I do remember.
People forget that the Hamas leadership lives in luxury in Qatar, lives in absolutely the lap of luxury and safety and everything. Israel got some incomplete intelligence. So they bombed an area where the leadership was not. And they did violate the sovereignty of, quote, a semi or neutral state. And this is where Trump did something extremely brilliant. What he did was he told the Qatari royal family that are sitting on trillion, or whatever, they're sitting on endless, more money than God type thing. He said, we're going to have bases and we're going to give you a complete security blanket. And we're not going to ever allow the Israelis to come into your country again. That was the tacit agreement. But we'll have a military presence in your country. So it was a mixed bag for Israel, but mostly a defeat. This Al Jazeera is an international media outlet. Spews to the Arab masses, the Arab street, nothing but hatred against Jews and Israel and the whole thing. They are probably, the journalists, they're probably the safest journalists in the world now. And Qatari money, I'm not even going to go into it, the amounts of money of academic institutions and think tanks that they've bought in this country and in other parts of the Western world. It's basically been a victory for Qatar. They're safer now than they were before the war.
And I think for some of our listeners and viewers, you might on a future podcast need to defend that of the particular monies going into what we would consider
for instance,
venerated institutions.
Well, for instance, like Northwestern, a good part. I'm a Chicago guy. A good part of my family, actually, my grandfather on my father's side was during the 1970s the oldest living alumni of Northwestern's medical school.
Wow.
Another relative became, as you know, as a world famous theater department, became a very famous lighting. So my family has long connections to Northwestern that had been an anti-Semitic school, which I won't go into, but in spite of its anti-Semitism, it would allow exceptional Jewish students to go there. But at any rate, Qatar bought Northwestern. They set up a whole campus for them in Northwestern with, endowed chairs, the whole thing, and control over the curriculum.
All right, let's hear from you, Northwestern grads.
Yes.
Let's hear from you about this.
Yes.
In fact, I'm thinking of a lovely Jewish young student who was there not long ago.
Yes. So anyway, let's move on to the next one about leaving Qatar for the time being.
Leaving Qatar. 4. Israel is the only hope for Jewish continuity and consciousness.
It is entirely, yeah.
Given current trends and the continuing growth of anti-Semitism, Jewish communal life in Europe could be nearly non-existent by 2050, and South America could go the same way.
It has gone the same way, actually.
You feel like that's happened already.
Demographically, it has. These proud communities are shadow themselves in Argentina, Chile. Mexico's a mixed bag.
And we talked a little bit about that
But there was
yesterday.
there was a very curious thing that things are always tend to be a little bit complicated. We mentioned earlier in the podcast that roughly, they're estimating roughly 140,000, maybe more, Israelis have left the country since the Hamas war. Fear for their family, their safety, for everything. A lot of these were the most educated and productive members. They've mostly gone to the United States, some Canada, some Western Europe. They may start to reinvigorate these diaspora communities. But more than likely, and I had quite a discussion with a friend of mine who's a very high-level Israeli academic who has actually family in the United States, said, oh, they're always going to be Jewish. I said, no, in this country, every group assimilates over time. So in the short term, I could see a lot more dynamism in America and Canadian Jewish communities. But the long-term thing is that Jewish life, Jewish creativity, innovation will all be in Israel. And there'll be Orthodox communities elsewhere that really hold to the Torah, to the sacred books.
And you feel like just because of assimilation that it's not as strongly a Jewish presence or Jewish thought or Jewish culture.
Oh
being
yeah, we're as I
saved
mentioned to you that we peaked around in America, 1964, 1970.
even though you would say that that the Jewish community was assimilated into American life.
It wasn't.
You felt like it wasn't, and
It was. We were more than tolerated. We were embraced.
okay. Yes, but I'm talking about assimilation since you brought that
No,
up.
there was still, because our grandparents were from the old country and still spoke Yiddish. So we were, my generation, I would only choose a Jewish woman to marry.
I know modern day younger Jews who feel that way
very
as
few
well.
non-Orthodox, which are most.
Correct.
The intermarriage rate
Right.
is somewhere between 60 and 80%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But you feel that weakens the community is what I'm.
It doesn't
I'm
have
getting
to,
from
but
you.
it has. That's a whole other discussion.
I'm interested in that
It's
discussion.
it's an interesting discussion, and it's a hard reality with a potential upside.
Oh,
But it's a.
I want to hear about the upsides.
It is. There's a real upside, which I could go into because I had always believed in embracing people who convert, embrace to love bomb them, and those people end up being the most observant, the most pro-Israel, the most wonderful, and you also avoid, for the most part, genetic diseases, because a lot of people don't realize that even in America in the 1950s, Jewish women were used, much like as Icelandic women are used now, as a pure genetic strain for studying cancer. So that we were very much a tight community, and we had genetic diseases because we had hundreds, if not thousands, of years of intermarriage. So there are things like Tay-Sachs disease and so on. And that when you bring in other genes, those types of familiar birth defects and so on, and cognitive defects disappear. So on just the genetic level, it's possible. Also, the converts tend to know much more about the Jewish faith. So in that part, there's a real upside. So that story hasn't been written yet.
Okay.
Hey.
Well, I look forward to that story.
Me too.
All right. Going on, we have 3 more.
Okay.
All right. The failure of the Israel Defense Forces and security services to anticipate and prevent the Hamas massacre has severely damaged their reputation, both in global mass media and online social media. Their former repute as Jewish Spartans and James Bonds has been shattered, resulting in the emboldening of anti-Semites around the globe.
So it's a very mixed bag here. Absolutely, that the initial failure of the Israeli Defense Forces and the Israeli Security Services, particularly the Shin Bet, which is the internal security services. Yes, that has been a disaster. But I told you what David Ben-Gurion, the George Washington of Israel, said. It's not important what Gentiles think, it's important what Israelis do. And I shared a very interesting statistic and story with you yesterday. The Israeli military, the infantry, is organized in 5 brigades. The toughest of the tough, really tough kids, was the Golani. And over the periods of peace that Israel thought they could live on their electronic billion-dollar fence between Gaza and the state of Israel. So parents wanted their kids to be computer genius type fighters. And they were pushing them for things like intelligence. We're using digital and high tech and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of the tough boots on the ground languished. Since October 7th, the Golani is being swamped with Israeli youth, young Israeli men wanting to go into combat.
Hand to hand, bring it on.
Literally,
Not
for real, not on the screen.
Not wanting
not doing a drone.
at a safe distance.
Not doing
drones.
No, or drones, no.
Yeah.
And you have a whole generation that's willing to fight. So I don't know if Israel's going to be eternal, but they ain't going anywhere tomorrow. And the next generation isn't going to be stupid, where you allow the enemy to build 200 miles of tunnels under an area and fortify it, and allow them to get away with the murder and that you're going to take the terrorists and give them brain surgery so they can kill you. Those days are over. So in Israel, the tide has turned, and I can't give you the exact numbers, but Israel was known to have the most advanced innovation in military technology. And that's one of the things that most Gentiles and Americans don't understand. A lot of American military innovation comes out of Israel. America has the most awkward and ungainly and unusable procurement of weapons system probably in the world. Israel has the fastest. So a lot of the top American military technology is Israeli. My understanding is that Israel's number of high-tech military startups has doubled in the last 2 years. Doubled.
Well, there's use for it. There's immediate use for it.
And because it's been battle tested now, for better and worse, Israel's a tiny country. It can't have a domestic arms industry. They have to, they can't build 7 tanks or
Right.
So yes, Israel's armaments have a halo around them at this point. So they ain't going anywhere. What kind of country it'll be, I don't know. But as a physical presence, they're there for the time being. So the Israeli Defense Services and securities have completely vindicated themselves.
So you feel like this,
They're heroes.
if you were to rewrite this today,
These people are heroes. And also civilians. Thousands of young Israeli men who are literally in Thailand and traveling the world after they came back to serve in their units without being called. And I believe the number that I have right. I know it's at least 300,000. I believe it's 360,000. These are the number of Israeli men between the ages of 18 and say 52 who were called up for Gaza. And these men had to fight and serve. And there was no thing, you're going to be here for 3 months, then you get to. No, you fight until we end this thing. So you had almost every able-bodied Israeli man was fighting or in the armed services. Here's a country of less than 7.5 million Jews, and you had 300 to 360,000 men under arms. What that number would be in the tens and tens of millions if you put this into the United States. Mm-hmm. And they had to serve, and you had to stay there till you won. or at least got a cessation of the fighting. No, so everybody, Israel's vindicated as a country that's going to survive. It will probably be as a pariah state for the near future, and that's going to be hard. But the world is an immoral place, and business is immoral. If you have business, you do business. So how this will pan out remains to be seen.